Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Combat Connections, connecting all things combat. We are here with your hosts Lucario, Masariu, and Lo, and today we have a special guest joining us, Gyro Orc from Gyro Orc's Martial Arts and Other Stuff YouTube channel. Gyro, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Alright, so Gyro is a martial arts YouTube content creator, and we're going to be interviewing him about martial arts topics. Okay, pulling up the questions.
Before we
So let's start
continue,
off. Okay,
before we
well,
continue, I just want to tell Gyro that I appreciate the enthusiasm with the thank you for having me.
yeah,
He
that
actually
was pretty funny.
happy.
This is the first time that anyone's ever invited me for a podcast.
I mean, you seemed like a chill dude and that you had stuff to talk about. So, right. So let's start off with the basics. Gyro, which martial arts have you trained and do you train? And on top of that, what about your martial arts do you like or not like?
Well, I've trained, in my opinion, mostly two, but as I said earlier, I did like a dojo type of taekwondo before, but I don't think it really helped me. But I first started out with HEMA. I think that's where my interest for martial art really started to spark. And I started, and then after that, I joined our niece because one, the our niece gym or group was cheaper to do. Also, the our niece group or the our niece system study in, it focuses on both weapons and in unarmed fighting, and it also takes or has aspects from other martial arts such as karate, Muay Thai, boxing, and taekwondo. Um, I've been training martial arts, HEMA for 2 years, Arnis for 3 years. Um, let's see. The first thing I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So, with the martial arts you've done, what things do you like or what things do you think could be improved?
Okay, I'll start off with the things I like. What I like is we have, as I said, we do weapons and unarmed. However, I feel like sometimes there are certain techniques that are missing, especially in regards to grappling. We are mostly focused on striking, and but in my experience, especially sparring with people who train in MMA, I lack a good solid defense if my back's on the ground or if I get taken down, as well as I also lack a defense if my stick gets grabbed. So I think we're pretty all right in striking. But when it comes to grappling, I think that's the system I train in's biggest flaw. So I'm trying to fix that, especially before the am I allowed to say the P word? The, the
Yeah, say whatever you want, man.
so like before the pandemic, I was looking into this school. I took the free lesson, and then I got try out jujitsu. I also had a bit of jujitsu during school, but it was short lived because the school couldn't get enough members to join the jujitsu club. So yeah.
Ah, that kind of sucks. Hate it when there's not enough people to do something.
Hmm.
Hopefully, you get to find something to expand upon your grappling.
Hmm.
So, what you mentioned so far is where you feel your system is lacking is in weapons retention and well-roundedness on the ground. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
So you've mentioned how long you've been doing martial arts and what martial arts you've done. What was your beginning? What made you start martial arts?
Well, first it was mostly my parents that um kind of made me do the taekwondo. I did kind of enjoy it, but when I was super young, I didn't quite fully understand what martial arts was. Plus, in the school we did, there was no sparring, and we did kata, but or they called it kata. I'm not even sure if that's the proper term anymore.
I
Um,
think it's Pumse, isn't it? Is the Korean?
Yeah. In Korean, it's pumse. Kata is a Japanese term.
hmm. Well, I guess that explains about the first school I went to, but they didn't even explain what values or the practical aspects of these forms were, and that always confused me. And for a long time, I just thought, oh, so martial arts is just about forms. But I was heavily wrong. I so this is kind of cringy, but I did a bit of like LARP with friends, and then one day this there was a fencer who actually came to this group with when we were LARPing. He kicked my ass, and then I was like, oh, I wanted to learn that. So then I joined HEMA, and then from that I learned mostly rapier, longsword, and side sword fencing, and I also did a bit of sword and buckler as well. And then I realized that I want to learn also how to fight with weapons more, but also how to fight unarmed. Because for a long time, I never felt confident in myself because I was always afraid of being beaten up or bullied um, because I didn't know how to fight unarmed. So after I joined our niece and then I trained more and sparred more, I started to develop more confidence in that. So I'd say when I started HEMA is when I started to actually grow more passionate about martial arts.
That's really interesting. Since you joined Arnis, how much have you trained unarmed versus armed? Like, what's the percentage roughly there?
I know other groups, especially other groups I've visited, they start off with armed and they mostly have a focus on armed. I mean on armed. However, in Latazeros, we have an even balance between armed and unarmed. So half of the class would be with weapons, and then the other half of the class would be unarmed.
Huh,
Mostly we
that's
just do sticks. We don't focus too much on knives. Our opinions on knife defense is kind of different from other systems, but that's a different topic itself.
no. We can go into that if you want to.
Um, well, I don't mean to start anything controversial or any wars, but I honestly, especially in the seminars that I've been in, that where other systems would showcase knife defense, I kind of disagree with it. Have you seen like those things where it's like you want to grab this and then you do several steps and then you disarm them without any resistance? I've seen that with several seminars that I've been it to, especially involving other systems. However, I think my instructor told me that knife defense is hard and it's first it's impossible to not get cut. I'm sure everyone's heard of that. My instructor in the Philippines, he was actually attacked. He tried doing some of the defenses, but he actually got the knife stabbed into his forearm. I don't know the 100% full details of it, but he did have a scar to show it. But yeah.
That sounds pretty intense. I suppose that's the issue is you can never really rely on something, and especially if you've never done it with resistance to know whether it's going to work for you.
Hmm.
So, the thing with knife defense is most systems lack accountability, meaning they'll teach the defenses with way too many steps. They don't minimize them. So
Yeah.
if you learn something that originally will take you 12 steps, your job as a martial artist is, hey, the next time you do it, try to make it 11 steps. Next time you do it, try to make it 10 steps, and so on and so forth, until you can get it down to a singular motion. What I
Hmm.
mean by accountability is a lot of these, I can't really even say FMA schools, a lot of these karate schools, kung fu schools, FMA schools, it's really in every system. When they teach a knife defense or even stick defenses, they will teach how to do it slowly with a compliant individual.
Hmm.
Accountability needs to be held within anything. I've seen knife defense from a lot of systems. The best knife defense I've seen is the Pakualan from Lameco. I
Hmm.
just
I'll look into that.
because I've seen individuals who can pull it off that I can purposely try to stab and I can't stab them. In my
Hmm.
mind, I can't stab them, then it works. But the easiest knife defense is have your own knife. Even if you're sitting there training your own knife defenses, if someone has a knife and you don't have one, they're already at a really big advantage.
Yeah, plus
Train-
I think it
If you
also depends on
train,
the place you live in because where I live in, I'm not even allowed to carry any type of weapon without, if I get caught, then I'll be arrested, put into jail or prison.
Same, bro.
see, that's fair. That's where like Elise Palat training really comes into play. Like whenever I
Mm-hmm.
flew over to London, I wasn't allowed to carry the knives that I usually carry. I wasn't allowed to keep my 9mm on my side.
Hmm.
So what did I carry? I carried a flashlight. And when they asked me about it, because they did, my exact answer was, "Well, I'm scared of the dark," and they left it at that.
Huh.
That's a story I'll always tell anybody. Anyways, you have to be held accountable within your training. If you do something without resistance, then it's just meaningless movements.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked a bit. You seem to have done a bit of weapons. Hema and Arnis combined. What's your favorite weapon in any martial arts system to train with?
Whew. Um. Whew. Well, I think when it comes to blades, definitely the side sword was actually the most fun for me. When it comes, but at the same time, I guess sticks and side sword.
The side
Most
sword is the one that gets confused with rapier a lot, right? The
Yeah,
thin.
so basically side swords kind of like a rapier, slightly shorter, but has more more weight towards the tip of the blade. So it's slightly more top heavy, but still easy to maneuver.
Interesting.
Um yeah, okay, that's it.
Any particular reason why that's your favorite?
Mostly because I really like one-handed weapons. One-handed weapons always intrigue me more than two-handed. Plus especially if I get to use a second weapon or paired weapons, particularly bucklers and sometimes even daggers. I always just was so fond of using those, and I found those the most fun types of sparring. Even just using one hand or just one sword, I mean, I always just find that more fun rather than rapier sparring or longsword. Even though rapier's one-handed, I just still kind of prefer the way the side sword would feel.
Interesting. I've heard the side sword compared a lot to the Chinese Jian sword. Have you ever had any
Yeah.
experience with a Chinese sword?
I have training Jians in my home actually. So
Oh, nice.
I've actually well I've never used them for sparring unfortunately, but I have practiced not necessarily it's like not in any kung fu forms, but I have used it to help me practice some arnis and hema drills with it. The weight's very nice. Um Other than that, all I can say is not a fan of the hilt mostly because of the lack of hand protection. But
Yeah.
I know not all swords have that luxury, and I think as a martial artist, especially focusing on weapons or swords particularly, you should probably get proficient with different types of swords. So yeah,
Oh, what type of swords have you had experience with?
rapier, longsword, side sword. We did a bit of well, and we I did most after HEMA, most of my experience ended up just going to sticks. So I also had experience with staves. I also played around with a bit of nunchucks, both in sparring and just in drills. Oh, by the way, all these weapons that I'm mentioning are weapons that I have done some sparring with. So I'm not gonna mention any weapons that I haven't sparred with, but I do have like, for example, I have like training axes, training tonfas, but I've never actually got the opportunity to spar with them.
Do you hope to? Do you want to do a lot more weapon sparring?
Yeah, in fact, I just want to do a lot more sparring. I'm always hungry for more sparring, more experience.
Sparring's the life, man. It's the best part of any
Yeah.
martial arts training.
Yeah, yeah.
You had mentioned nunchucks. There's been, I don't know if you've seen quite a few videos out recently about the effectiveness of nunchucks as a weapon.
Yeah, I've
What do
seen
you think
those.
about that? What do
I
you think about it? Are
actually,
nunchucks good?
I somewhat agree with them actually. Like, also, I'm not sure. I haven't seen too much of those videos fully, but in my experience, it's actually harder to defend against strikes, especially if your opponent has a weapon with the nunchucks. Because a lot of the times, especially the times when I did spar with nunchucks, especially with friends in school, even though I wasn't supposed to bring nunchucks to school, or the training ones at least. Um, so they would use a stick, or we used something to replace stick. Basically, short story short, I brought these toy lightsabers. I know the weight's not the same, but it was the easiest way for me to smuggle or to bring something for the armed martial artists or the weapon-based martial artists to practice with in school so we can all spar. So they would just use something to represent a stick or even a sword. And when I used the training nunchucks, it was harder to defend because I can't directly block things without using while using one hand. And also, I have a reach disadvantage sometimes, even if I'm holding at the very bottom. I think Jesse Enkamp made a video about the proper way to hold the nunchuck or something. And then I tried it, and then even still, I felt like I was still at a disadvantage.
You
So
just heard there with the mention of Jesse and Camp.
oh, was I not supposed to?
Oh no, no, you're allowed to. It's just a joke. He's not particularly a fan.
Ah,
Yeah, I
still,
have personal reasons against him.
ah, but
We've not had the best.
um,
Continue. This
so
will get cut out.
basically my uh I also don't like nunchucks too much. They do look cool and they do look aesthetic, but I'm kind of just sick of seeing them in media, especially as in you see in like some fighting games or just movies, you'll see like a Bruce Lee ripoff, and then it's always he's always gonna have nunchucks or something like that.
Like one quote I always remember with Nunchaku is half the usefulness, twice the training. And I've always kind of laughed at it.
I guess
I've
to an
never
extent
really
that's
actually
actually
tried them.
Luca, did you get cut off?
No, no, I just said I've never trained with them.
Oh, I
mm,
see.
I have some. I've never done an art that uses them. So
mm.
I mean, I think nunchaku are pretty fun, but yeah, again, I don't think they're practical at all. They're fun to do tricking with, though. So, what are your thoughts on tricking, by the way? Um, you know,
Tricking.
like the extreme karate, like iska and that sort of stuff, where they're not necessarily doing something that looks practical, but they're doing the fun flips and the just the tricks with the different martial art weapons.
I have a big respect for it. I know what they do is very hard to do. I wouldn't say, yeah, as you said, they're not exactly effective or practical. I agree. I sparred with a tricker in school actually. He wanted to use his tricking. We were sparring with weapons, basically just toilet sabers, but we were pretending they were sticks. Um, he couldn't. He did try pulling off those big spinning moves. It was fun to watch, but I was easily able to defend and counter him. But still, what he does is very hard to do and very impressive. I see why a lot of people like it and like looking at it and doing it.
One thing to bring up is you train FMA,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're ever stick sparring or knife sparring or
Mm-hmm.
working on draws and you go to have a failure of a weapon, meaning maybe your fingers stumble, maybe your hand freezes up and you go to drop your weapon, tricking a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
time will create muscle memory for fine, minute details. So, for
Huh.
example, I knew an individual years ago who was really good at doing creative kata for Nichogama, so having two kamas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was good at spinning them on his hands. What we found out is after he switched over to doing Filipino martial arts, and he would go to be using solo baston, so a single stick, if he would go
Mm-hmm.
to have failure with his weapon, meaning he was going to be disarmed, he was going to drop it, his reactions to the failures was a lot better because he was used to spinning them.
Huh, that's interesting.
Would you ever do a tricking martial art, Gyro?
Heck yeah, if I ever got the opportunity, I'm open to doing like pretty much any martial art.
Which martial art that you haven't done do you most want to try?
Whew. Oh man, there's a lot. The one that sticks to my mind the most right now is probably this martial art called Yao Yan.
So Filipino kickboxing.
Yeah. I think my dad practiced a bit of it before. Um, and I did more research on it and just it looks interesting. Even though it's still very similar, I just want to see how they teach it and what philosophies or sayings that they have. Another martial art that I also really want to try is of course BJJ. Also Muay Thai. Okay, I'm about to end up saying my entire list. Okay. Pretty much yeah, those martial arts are the ones that I would want to try the most.
Which one out of, because Muay Thai and Yaoyan are somewhat similar. I've seen a couple of videos of
Yeah.
Yaoyan. It looks like a Muay Thai mixed with Sanda and style. So, out of Muay Thai or Yaoyan, which one would you take over the other?
Whew. Practically, since where I live, there's no Yao Yan gyms here, so probably Muay Thai. But if I got the chance to try Yao Yan, even just for a bit, I'd definitely try Yao Yan over Muay Thai.
So I'm not familiar with Yao Yan. How would you describe it for those who have no idea what this art is?
Basically, to me, it kind of just looks like Muay Thai, but in the Philippines. I also see a bit of like hammer fists and spinning, a lot of spinning back fists in some of the stuff I've seen, but they are very similar as far as what I've seen, but I'm not 100% sure to talk about it.
It's a more circular Muay Thai.
Kind of looks like movie Muay Thai, like Tony Jaa Muay Thai.
Oh yeah.
You actually knew an individual who was training Yao Yan, Luca.
Hmm?
You actually knew an individual who was training Yao Yan.
Really?
Yes, he's no longer with us.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know why she left me. Him.
Oh, really? I didn't know he did Yaoyan.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Not the best example, but there you go.
All right, Gerald, we've gone through which martial arts you've done and which martial arts you want to do. Which martial art, and you're only allowed one, so this is really going to be pushing it for you, is the best martial art?
Oh man. I honestly don't think there is a best martial art. It's more so of the practitioner in my opinion and how well they use it. But I know that's pretty much what everyone says, right?
That's the easy answer.
All right.
Um,
If since that's an answer, how about we change the question a bit?
all
Right.
right.
What martial art is the best martial art for the average person to be able to apply efficiently?
I know MMA is not a system, but or even counts as one martial art, but can I say MMA?
Yeah, I'll give you that. I think I personally consider MMA to be a system because most, like 90% of MMA schools you go to are teaching the same system.
Because I think, in my opinion, especially with those who I've sparred with, if they come from an MMA background, they seem to be a lot more well-rounded, especially the way they fight and the way they spar. And in my opinion, I kind of wish I started with MMA because I think if you learn MMA, you can get a good foundation in striking and your ground game and takedowns and grappling and so on.
Would you take MMA over the Filipino system that you're currently doing?
Yes. Like I'd probably still take both or train both, but I definitely want to improve or take MMA like right now in at this current point of time. Mostly because I just want to really, especially recently, I really want to focus more on improving my unarmed abilities rather than my armed abilities.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, oh, Master, you gonna say something?
I was just gonna say that obviously I don't have a lot of experience with the MMA gyms, but when I was looking at a lot of MMA gyms around here, a lot of them seem to be really focused on grappling, specifically BJJ, which I don't think is really the most it takes a little more thought than just punching someone in the face. So that's just my opinion on from what I've seen for from the MMA gyms that I visited.
Hmm.
So we talk now that we know your some of your martial arts opinions. Who who makes you want to do martial arts? What are your who are your inspirations in the world?
Whoa, there's a big list of people who inspire me. A lot of people, especially the martial art YouTubers, inspire me. But one that comes to my mind most is probably my instructor. Um,
I mean, that's probably a good thing that your instructor is an inspiration. What does he do that's inspiring to you?
well, since it was a non-profit group, he teaches he taught us for free, basically. And another thing inspiring is that all the experiences that he has and he's sharing it. That's pretty much what inspires me, basically. I know I get inspired pretty easily. It's I don't have any deep reason.
So you said the experiences that he has. What sort of experience that he
Particularly
has?
the experience that he has in mostly other martial arts and his sparring and his fights.
Is he a good fighter then?
In my
Experiences such
opinion, when
as
I
what
sparred with him, I think he's pretty good.
experiences such as what you mentioned earlier whenever he was visiting the Philippines, yeah.
Hmm. I'm not sure if he's visiting because I think he's living there now, but I'm not 100% sure on his situation.
I'm referring to what you spoke about earlier with the knife defense.
Oh, but
Those
the knife defense.
experiences. Those
Yes.
experiences. That's what I'm referring to.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the another situation where he's when he moved to the Philippines.
Nice. That's always good to have an instructor who can inspire you. All right. So you talked about that you think you'd want to do MMA and you think MMA may be the best system. In terms of self defense, how practical do you think MMA is?
Who against someone another person who's unarmed, I think it would do well. However, this in my opinion, there's a lot that you have to adapt in regards to making MMA work in the streets if they have a weapon, for example. I think who was it? Fight Commentary Breakdowns actually made a video on this. Um, something about that he what would be normally a dominant position in MMA would end up not working too well because the other opponent would have a knife. But it's hard to say what martial art is the best for self-defense, especially in regards to knives, since even my opinion on knife defense, it's it's not exactly the most confident and yeah.
Yeah, I remember the video you were talking about with fight commentary breakdowns. Is that the I think it was a MMA fighter who like he had one friend that was trained and one that was untrained, trying to stab him with a knife to see if his grappling techniques would work against it.
Hmm.
Another thing I'd like to mention is a lot of times in cage fighting, you will see that the full guard or dolce, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a they consider it a fairly dominant position within the cage. Like it's a good position for the cage. You can submit people from there.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to do that on pavement, you run a risk of one hitting your head on the ground while getting into that position, and two giving them the position to be able to lift you up and then slam you against the planet.
Mhm.
Hit
Lots
them
of
with the
business.
earth. Spoken like a true judoka.
Shh.
So let's move on a little bit from MMA to what some people would consider the exact opposite for effective self-defense. Your opinions on Aikido, Taekwondo, and arts that are well known for their less resistive training for real self-defense application.
For can I be completely honest?
This is your platform, my dude. You can say anything you
Okay,
want.
thank. Okay. To be honest, I actually do not see too much value in regards to the techniques I've seen from Aikido in any situation, either if it's in sparring, either if it's in a fight, or if it's in the streets. Um, that's my opinion on Aikido. But I don't mean to start a war with anyone. That's just my opinion. I'm sure there are people who could make it work, but I have yet to see it. Um, Taekwondo, I've sparred with other people who come from Taekwondo backgrounds, and some of them are actually really tough to deal against. So I think Taekwondo has a higher chance versus Aikido to actually work if they do it right, or if they adapt correctly to their opponent.
Interesting. So when it comes to being able to defend yourself, what do you think is the most important aspect?
Hmm. In my opinion, it probably has to be mentality.
In what way?
So first, in regards to self-defense, whether the mentality to know whether you should engage or where you shouldn't engage. Second, the mentality to know what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Like let's say you know all these options and you should probably have the mentality to choose the most efficient and most practical one at the time. But I understand that probably in the heat of the moment you won't have time to even strategically think about stuff. It just happens, especially during all the adrenaline.
Are you referring to
um
things via muscle memory, or are you thinking of cognitive ability to understand the use of force continuum? Because there's two different routes you could go with this conversation.
I guess both in a way, but in my opinion, I think mentality to know when to engage and when not to engage, because I think that can also still apply to even those who aren't martial artists. Because let's say someone who's untrained, and then their friend is getting the shit beat out of the. Oh wait, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, man, go ahead.
Okay, let's say they're getting beaten up, and then um you can either one just watch him record and not help them at the moment, even though you clearly see them losing, or two, you step in but also potentially risk getting hurt or even getting killed yourself. And I think, and also when, okay, sorry, that was probably a bad example. Um, probably so. Um, okay, I think I have an example. So probably what I mean mentality is, for example, knowing when to use violence and when it's appropriate. Because let's say you've seen those situations where somebody like bumps into somebody and then they'll start a fight over something that probably shouldn't even fight about. And I think that's what I mean by mentality.
That makes a lot of sense.
So the thought process of when to act, when to let it go.
Yes.
So, you mentioned you've had some experiences with bad taekwondo and your opinions on aikido and some of the issues within Filipino arts that you've come across. When it
Hmm.
comes to traditional martial arts as a whole, do you see a lot of people, especially in the MMA or combat sports community, will refer to the problems with traditional martial arts? Do you have a Do you think there are problems with traditional martial arts as a whole? And if so, what
I
would they
think
be?
I think so. It would have a similar problem to what many systems that are, or even martial arts that um, lack a certain aspects have. They'll some traditional martial arts, or as far as what I've watched and heard, they sometimes the issue is also the group or cult-like behavior sometimes.
We
But
just had
pardon?
we just had a podcast on this.
Oh, I guess sorry, I must have missed it. My bad. Um,
I wouldn't worry about it. I think the cult mentality of martial arts isn't just limited to the traditional aspect, but it's very interesting because there's kind of this sense of martial arts being like this community, this, we all bow in together, that sort of thing. But then there's this also this kind of darker side that can happen sometimes when people just become so blinded to the instructor and they just do these things without any question.
One thing I want to mention, actually, this is a good discussion. If we're talking about the cult mindset, it's not limited only to traditional arts because this is going to catch some flack from BJJ and Krav Maga and MMA,
hmm.
the biggest names on the planet, and they have a very large cult following.
Oh, I guess the people I've met never really showed that side of them or are like that.
Not
Lo
even
just doesn't like BJJ. Don't worry about it.
like if you hear a lot of people when they're talking about grappling, they are always BJJ is the only way to go. BJJ has the best grappling.
Oh yeah, I've definitely heard that around.
That's what I'm speaking of for the cult mentality with that. Whereas for
Uh,
Krav Maga, you can see lots of things that are more akin to yellow bamboo than Krav Maga, but are being touted as Krav Maga. We
hmm.
actually something local that is extremely similar.
I
And
guess
then
another issue with traditional martial arts, in my opinion, I noticed some groups are unwilling to explore or evolve. They want, but they want to maintain a tradition, which is nothing wrong with that. If they want to do that, go ahead. But if they're gonna promote like self-defense, they should probably, in my opinion, they should probably evolve with the times and probably learn because especially if you see people on the streets. I forgot who said this, but they said most people these days have some type of training, whether if it's like from taekwondo or even high school wrestling. So what would your counter be against that? And if you don't have something to respond against that, then and you're unwilling to learn a counter against that or even new counters against that, um, I think that's an issue.
I would really bring up on that is the unwillingness to evolve is really a modern construct. If you look into karate, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these old Okinawan men cross-trained a lot.
Mm.
Even if you look at something a bit more modern, for example, Gichin Funakoshi, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't really talk about it much. You know who Gichin Funakoshi is, yeah?
Kinda.
He is the man touted as the father of modern day karate. He's the creator of Shotokan karate, right?
Okay, then I don't know who he is.
Right. Well, he's a very large name within karate, and a lot of people associate karate itself with, hey, they're not going to evolve.
Hmm.
This friend of his, who he actually took the belt system from, was Jigoro Kano. If you look at karate and you look at judo, you see two sides of the same coin. They can cross train.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. People saying that karate itself does not have any grappling. You can find it within all the movements. Funakoshi himself had, I think, 12 throws, 9 official, which
Hmm.
he learned from his original style, which was Muto, Okinawan wrestling. He just cross trained with Jigoro Kano to kind of tweak them a little bit to make them more applicable to the modern day.
Hmm.
That's just something I'd like to bring up. It's more of a modern construct, people not wanting to evolve.
So yeah, that's a message to everyone who thinks that they can't evolve their art because of traditions. You don't know the traditions of your art.
This is fair. Like I want to make this statement right here and right now. We are not sponsored. We are not connected. We have no affiliation with them at all. But I would like to recommend anyone listening to go look at Karate Culture. They have some great content, and I really love what they're doing.
Is that a website or a YouTube or a podcast?
They have a YouTube and they have an Instagram. That's all I know of. They probably have some more things, but that's all I've watched them on.
Okay, and for those who don't know, Jigoro Kano is considered the founder of judo.
Yep.
Well, while we're on the subject of karate, then Gyro, have you seen the Netflix series Cobra Kai?
Yes.
Would you
No.
rather train in Miyagi-Do or Cobra Kai?
Ooh. Like, what do you mean by which Cobra Kai? Like Cobra Kai taught by Kreese or the Cobra Kai taught by John Lawrence?
That is your choice. You can specify. In the same way, you can choose Miyagi-Do with Daniel or Mr. Miyagi.
I don't have any deep reason for this, but I think I'd just go with Cobra Kai, but the one taught by John Lawrence.
Just because it's cooler?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know what the best answer is? Miyagi-Do under Chosen.
Yeah, you know what? That's fair. Chosen's pretty cool.
Oh, Chosen's the crap.
The Okinawan one.
Yeah, when actually I don't want to say any spoilers just in case anyone watched this.
Hey, spoilers for season 3. Mute your phone for like 5 minutes.
That's the guy when Daniel went to Okinawa, the guy who was in one of the previous Karate Kid films, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the one that taught him to like do Filipino ginunting and stuff.
Right.
Alright, cool.
I've got a question that kind of came up on the moment that would be really good for content on the podcast.
Okay.
How do you feel Cobra Kai and similar movies, TV shows, books, so be it, whatever it is, has affected martial arts for the future? Has it been good for advertisement? Has it been good for advertisement? Or has it hindered the process of martial arts in the slightest? What has it done?
Well, I think it certainly does bring people to. I think it makes people like want to do. Some people would want to do martial arts more. Like we've seen people inspired to do martial arts from Karate Kid, right? So I'm sure this would be no different to inspire other people. But at the same time, I feel like some people could potentially take it the wrong way and think that all martial arts schools or dojos are have these wars like what Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do has. But as far as in my experience, I haven't seen any or been in any schools that have exactly warred against each other like that.
I've seen a few.
You have?
It's been known to happen, especially back in the day.
I mean, I wouldn't say wars, but I definitely know there are definitely some politics in the Kempo world.
Yeah, a lot of people fighting each other, dojo stormings.
I wouldn't know about dojo stormings there, but definitely philosophy and, whose is the real art and that sort of thing.
You know the most popular one, right? I guess the one of the major original ones. Yeah, Luca.
Which one are you talking about? Are you talking about Funakoshi?
Funakoshi and Motobu.
Yes.
I mean that's old drama. But you can look back.
They had a fight. They had a couple of big fights, didn't they? But only one that's really well known.
So who's Motobu?
Motobu Ryu, which is like he's Jesse Enkamp claims him to be the greatest fighter in karate history. He had several rivalries with Funakoshi. They shared somewhat of a lineage.
Okay. Never heard that name before, that's all.
It's really interesting to read into. Motobu Choki. You can read on both of them.
So I assume
Yeah.
a lot of you guys do Japanese martial arts, right?
Yeah.
So have you seen that video where it says um karate and Kali are the same, or it originated from Kali or something like that? I think Jesse
Yeah.
Enkamp also made that. What are your guys' thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Um,
Me and Lo looked into it a
okay.
decent amount because the reasoning for that was a certain drill which is shared in Filipino arts, Okinawan arts, and Wing Chun. And we looked into it a certain amount, and there is a lot of historic crossover, obviously, between every Asia's like relatively in terms of that part of Asia is small, and there was a lot of travel between um traders and a lot of martial arts influences. Okinawa was kind of the home for that in a way, so they have influences from everything. A lot of it from China, which is the most well known, and then Thailand is second most well known with their own wrestling that was already there. So yeah, it makes sense that the Filipino arts could have had some influence.
One thing I'd like to mention though, and I really just explained this a couple days ago to an individual. You have two individuals who are really close friends. They're about to spar and exchange knowledge, right? One on the left does, for example, Waruryu. The one on the right does Taekwondo, right? These two individuals, they spar. They exchange knowledge. Say the Waruryu has a really good kick defense that ends up with the Taekwondo practitioner being slammed on his back. The Taekwondo practitioner sees this, asks him about it, learns it, and then he applies it within his Taekwondo. Why did he do it? Because it works. The same thing can be said of any martial art.
Hmm.
Yeah, really, no martial art is ever going to be the same because whoever is teaching you that martial art has had their own experiences, and then you will have your own experiences with what you've been taught. So, no matter if you're teaching the same system, no matter how closely you're teaching that system, the martial art, your life experiences will always be with you. So, your martial art is going to be a little bit different.
One thing to bring up actually is you mentioned beforehand that you trained Taekwondo, yeah?
Me?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, and you guys did forms.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever meet any other individual who trained Taekwondo but was from a different school than you?
Well, not while I trained in Taekwondo, but afterwards,
Even afterwards.
especially when I was sparring in school, I've sparred against people who trained in different Taekwondo schools, not the one I went to.
All right. Well, if
And
they trained
what
in a
they
different
did,
school, did you
pardon?
ever see if they trained in a different school, did you ever see them do a form that you had the same form within your school, but they did it slightly different?
They yes, actually.
All right. This is found within a lot of different systems. So, as Luca has said, that no martial arts ever going to be the same because of personal experiences, it also changes from different individuals. You will have one instructor who is training, say, three different students.
Hmm.
One could be ectomorphic, one could be endomorphic, and one could be mesomorphic. So they have three different body types.
Hmm.
The instructor may choose to teach each of them a different version of the kata because it suits them better. If you have someone stocky, they're not going to be sitting there jumping in the air trying to do all these flashy kicks, right? They're going to try to stay grounded more so.
Hmm.
You're not going to teach, for example, you're not really going to teach someone who is 4'9" to sit there and try to brawl it out with a 6'5" heavyweight.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to teach them what will work better for their body type. That's where a lot of these differences come from. Now, you can take an individual who knows the katas, who is well trained and well versed on the matter, and they can critique the kata, but they don't really have any place to try to correct it. One example that we actually just talked about this in Morton the other day is for the kata Takyoko Shodan, which, if you do any Japanese karate, it's really one of the first child's katas or first beginner's kata that anyone will ever do.
Hmm.
It's just block, punch, turn, block, punch, turn, block, punch, punch, punch. It's simple like that. It's considered your baby steps. You're supposed to learn the basics of how to move your body. Some guys, when they teach it, they'll teach, hey, you lunge through and you throw a body shot to the xiphoid process. So, oisuki to churan, right? A lot of other guys, they'll teach it, hey, maybe that doesn't work for you. Instead of lunging through with a punch, it may work better to do agyuke, so a rising receive-ins. So you will throw your arm up. Some people may teach it, hey, this is just offensive. You're going to be parrying a haymaker, parrying a jab, parrying a hook. It doesn't matter. But on the other hand, another individual may see the same thing and interpret it as, hey, you're not actually parrying. You're doing forearm smash because you're a shorter individual. It doesn't make sense for you to try throwing punches with individuals. You're going to slam your forearm into the throat. There's different interpretations, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
thought I had the same thing yesterday in one of our communities. I was having a discussion with someone about the Chum Q form within Wing Chun, and I had 3 examples of the Chum Q form. I had one which was Ip Man performing it, one which was Sifu Samuel Kwok performing it, and one which was a student of Chu Shongtin Wing Chun. And a variation between the forms was, even though the moves were the same, the way they performed the moves and the intention behind it, to the point where something could be a block in one form but a strike in another form. It's really dependent on how you're using it and who you are.
Yes. Like
I
if we're
guess.
talking personal experiences, I can remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I went to a Shitoryu dojo, and they were talking about the Pinan slash Heian katas, right? So considered your first real katas, right? Almost every Okinawan system are going to have these. They're very common. We started talking about different interpretations, different applications. So what they did, I was voluntold to step forward and show 2 variants of the katas, because I know the Kinkojiku variant, and I also know the modern JKA and JKF variants. So the head instructor sent out one of their Sankyu, so one of their beginner brown belts, to step up, and he did Heian Shodan up to Heian Godan. Everyone applauded for him, and then I stepped forward. I did Heian Shodan to Heian Godan in the Kinkojiku style. And then when I finished that, everyone applauded, and then I switched over to doing a modern JKA style. That led to a deep discussion on, hey, what are the minor differences found within katas, and what are the interpretations that could be changed, therefore? Why do you move your arm at a different angle here? Well, because if I'm smaller, maybe it works a little bit better. If you have an instructor who is 6'6" and built like a truck, maybe they're used to being able to muscle through people. If you have an instructor who is 5'2" and extremely small, maybe they're used to having to use actual leverage. Different people have to apply things differently.
I mean, that kind of reminds me of my school, the first one that I really trained at, the Kempo. We would learn how to do the forms, essentially like the quote unquote proper way. And then once we got more familiar with them, and then we got to a higher enough rank where we truly understood it, then we were able to just kind of put our own flair on it, is kind of how we described it. Basically, just talking about exactly what you're talking about, like me being shorter, more stocky. I focus on a lot of power, so you could tell that I would have a lot of that influence on a lot of my forms, whereas someone who is maybe very tall, a lot more graceful, you could see that influence in their form as well. It just kind of, some of us would just be better naturally at certain forms. Like one of our forms that we have that's actually pretty popular, not just in Kempo, but I think it's a fairly well heard of, if not known, Stature of the Crane. It's very graceful, a lot of balance. I'd get a lot of comments from my instructors saying I looked like a shrika when I did that, which apparently is this bird that just like stabs its prey. It's kind of vicious and not at all what you think of when you think of like this graceful bird. And it's just kind of interesting that I would do this form, and it would supposed to be like this calm, graceful sort of thing, and I made it look very aggressive, but then someone with another body type would do it, and they would actually make it look like the form was traditionally supposed to be, you know, showing off this balance and this grace and all of this stuff. Um, and, you know, it just kind of goes back to how the body differences change how the forms can look and feel. And that's just something that I always thought was interesting because, you know, we all learned it the same way. But then as we get further in the ranks and truly understand the form better, then we end up putting our own a flair and flavor onto the forms.
Honestly, that sounds about right for you. Calm,
And
gentle form. No, I'm gonna stab people.
It's a lot more fun that way.
One of the best analogies I use when training students is the analogy of a toolbox. Everyone knows what a toolbox is, right? Or a tool bag.
No, not in the slightest. It's not like it's right in the damn name.
Well, I mean, you are British. So, anyways, you're not going to pull out a hammer if you need to tighten a Phillips head screw. That's kind of self-explanatory. You take things that you find, you think, hey, this is going to be useful. I may need to save it for later. You will take a Phillips head, a flathead, a hammer, and maybe a putty knife. Throw them in a tool bag. Those are really your basics. Maybe a crowbar. These things have their own use. You shouldn't try to apply them if it's not going to work. You take what works, you discard what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
I teach multiple variants of Moashigiri or Moilong, right? So just a round kick. I can show them to two different individuals who I'm thinking of right now. One is 5'8" and extremely stocky. I can teach him to power through and he will hit you like a truck. I've then shown him three variants and he can apply them. The other individual is 6'6" and built like a string bean. I have to teach him more angular footwork to apply it at a different angle. That way it feels more sharp instead of brute force, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Are these different techniques? No, they're different applications of the same technique. You find what will work for you, and then you apply it as such.
We actually have a similar thing in Filipino martial arts, especially after we do learn fully the what we call the latos latos. It's a set of forms we have. We're actually allowed to change it so that it suits us better. Um, I also think, in my opinion, forms aside, I think this also applies to fighting styles as well. That's why we see different fighters fight differently, or just different martial arts artists fight differently.
I think one of the biggest things. This is gonna sound a bit off topic, but it's on topic. One of the biggest things that people who don't spar miss out on when it comes to martial arts is being able to apply what they're learning in the way that works for them. Because in the end, no matter what you're learning, no matter how you learn it, it's all just theory until you apply it. And when you apply it, that theory becomes practical. So every technique is a theoretical technique, and then the application comes when you spar.
True.
It's a blueprint of such.
All right, that was a long but good discussion on that. Let's move on to a little lighter, something that won't go into a whole ass hour by itself. Gyro, which martial art do you think is best for zombies, like fighting
Ooh.
zombies?
Okay, in my opinion, depending on the type of zombies, um, I think unarmed is probably going out the window. Some of them, mostly because it's kind of hard to strike a zombie. Will they be able to feel it? If they, like on some zombies, they might be able to get back up, even if you kick them down. In my opinion, you probably have a weapon, and if you can find a way to set up some sort of hold or submission that would break a limb without getting bitten or scratched, it's good. But I imagine that's going to be extremely difficult, especially if it's a horde of them. I would assume, or in my opinion, I think any type of armed martial art.
Luca,
Yeah.
I just had a breakthrough. The best martial art for zombies.
No, no.
Biathlon.
Oh, yeah.
Who know what now?
You ski with a rifle.
Right. What if you're not in an area where you can ski?
You move to an area where you can ski.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know though. Like, I think if you give Mike Tyson some gloves, he might be able to, like, depending on how rotted they are, just punch the head off of a zombie.
True.
Well, they do make paperweights. We are legally required to call them paperweights now.
He's referring to brass knuckles.
Yes,
Well,
that's
I'm not sure if you've seen this video. I think they said that how boxing applies into your knife fighting, especially changing pretty much every punch into a thrust. So imagine Mike Tyson, but suddenly you give him, let's say, punch daggers.
Now that would be interesting. I think we were having this conversation about
the karambit.
Karambits, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Give him an extended blade karambit, and let him work his outboxing. He'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But would you not get bit though?
I think if anything, Mike Tyson's going to be the one doing the biting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. While we're on the subject of boxing, hey Gyro, how do you feel about Logan versus Floyd?
Whew. I saw the hat footage and that Ryan Garcia video where he says he claims to teach him how to beat Floyd. I honest my, this is kind of my personal bias. I honestly hope Floyd destroys the shit out of Logan Paul. But that's just my opinion. I'm not sure if
I think
people feel
that's
the same
everyone's
way.
opinion.
Yeah, I was
think it's a
gonna
bit
say,
more
I think everyone hopes that.
I personally am not particularly a fan of either of them as people, but Logan's an idiot, and Floyd, it'd be an idiot's thing to bet on any one of them, Floyd.
Just making sure. Logan is that guy. He was in the suicide forest. He was in that situation, right? That was
Yes,
him.
that's him.
Yeah. Okay.
Put him out for that in the press conference. He was like, he was saying that he knows what Logan did to the people of Japan, and Logan needs to pay for that.
I didn't see the press conference.
All right, so before we start to wrap it up here, Gyro, are there any topics of conversation you particularly would like us to go into?
Actually, what are your thoughts on applying weapons techniques or even just weapon-based martial art techniques into your unarmed fighting? I know I mentioned this topic before, but it's just a topic I like to talk about.
I think it really
Especially-
depends on the weapon that you're training with, how much it can apply into your unarmed fighting. I mean, any sort of weapons training is probably good for muscle building. That's a big thing in Shorinji Kempo. We use weighted weighted jo, shakujo, and weighted I can't remember the Japanese word for it, so I'm just gonna say baston, the weighted kali sticks, and we train with those to build muscle for striking.
So the art that I basically have my base in, we didn't do a lot of direct weapon training. That was kind of just an optional class for anyone who's interested in it. But when we talked about weapons, our idea was that it's just an extension of our body. And then we would actually do drills where we would do our normal forms that we would always do, but then we would be given a weapon and figure out how to apply that weapon into the form we were working on. So sometimes we'd be given like a nunchuck or a bow, a screama stick, kama, just like whatever weapon the sensei decide to give you. So that's still the philosophy I hold. The weapon is simply just an extension of you, in that you should just be able to easily incorporate it into what you already know. So that's just my opinion on the whole thing. It's just an extension of you, and it should just be able to be easily applied. I don't know how I feel about that with my Muay Thai practice, but definitely when I was doing Kempo, it was pretty easy to transition between the weapon and
And
empty handed.
they have weapons in traditional Muay Thai, right? Lo, you probably know about that.
I think you're thinking of Krabi Krabong. It's
Maybe.
the Thai swords training. I think it's Krabi
Uh,
Krabong.
Yeah, I think
I
you're
mean,
right.
I think it's really dependent on the weapon. Like nunchucks, maybe not, but fencing you wouldn't think immediately. But then you look at JKD and how Bruce Lee took the footwork from fencing and applied it into striking.
It's like the 12 strikes drill I taught you, yeah?
Yeah,
Wednesday class. So this Wednesday that just passed, an hour of the class was me just teaching a student on how to apply the 12 strikes that you usually use with a stick or a knife, how to apply them with empty hand.
that was the first thing I did when you showed me the 12 strikes of Kali. Is I was like, okay, so I'm assuming this might be the open hand, and then we were talking about it. You're like, this is more the open hand. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, the biggest thing to remember for it is sombrada, to stay in the shadow.
When you teach your students to apply the stick strikes into their unarmed, do you do the direct movement or do you follow the trajectory?
Direct movement. I teach
Ah,
them to direct move it and tell them, hey, flow off of this with what has the least amount of effort on your end. Meaning, if you're doing a strike with a stick or a knife, that you take the knife or the stick away. If they go to do the strike, if it works better as a hammer fist, apply it as a hammer fist. If it works better as a ridge hand, apply it as such. If it works better as a jab or a hook, apply it as such. Whatever requires the least amount of movement. Because the more movement, the more moving parts. The more moving parts, the easier it is to stop. That would make a good video to do.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting video. But also, anyway, in Wing Chun, it's not something as much talked about, but they do have a similar philosophy to Filipino arts when it comes to the Bat Jam Dal, except we learned those at higher rank rather than as our beginning. But the base movements are essentially the same. You're using Bong Sao and Tan Sao with
is
your
that
direct
the one with the
striking.
butterfly swords?
Yeah, so butterfly swords are not exactly the same as Bacham Dao, but they're close enough that people equate them, and you can use the training butterfly swords, which I have. Training butterfly swords don't have the Bacham Dao. The only difference really is that Bacham Dao have a slight curve in the back and click together, so you can hold them in one sheath or in one hand. And then the same as in Shrinji Kempo with our. I need to remember where is it a Noi Logan Japanese for the stick Noi.
What size stick?
Kali stick.
Tanbo. I think
I
tanbo.
don't think that's right. That's not what we use, at least.
Well, I mean,
Anyway,
we've talked about your Japanese before.
okay. Anyway, in Shinji Kempo, when we use the Kali stick, the basic movements of it are the same. If we're doing a hook, we have the Kali stick with the tip facing outwards, and then the stick going along our forearm, so it can be used as a blocking device or hit with the ends, like you would use in Alisi Pola. And then when we're doing jabs, we just thrust with the top of it, and so on
Yes.
and so forth. Uppercuts, swing it
Yes.
up,
Tanbo
and
is the short stick.
okay, Tambo. Cool. So yeah, I think the majority of weapons you can find an application, but it's not always going to be there directly. You will have to look for it in some.
The most direct application I've seen, you can actually speak about now, karambit.
Karambit, yeah. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we literally, when we were going over the karambit, you literally said it's just do boxing with it.
Yeah, it's minor movements applied to boxing.
Boxing with slashes, which are basically hooks anyway, so just boxing.
Yeah, it's fun to apply. Even better to grapple with.
I mean, grappling with a knife in general sounds interesting. We were talking to someone from the Discord server that our last guest, Zangerald, runs about grappling with knives and trying to apply modern Brazilian jiu-jitsu to Japanese Koryu jiu-jitsu. Gyro, anything else you'd like to discuss? Or?
Um, hmm. Nothing that I have in mind right now, but do you guys have any other questions for me?
I think that was majority of our list. Really,
I've got a question that I ask every martial artist I meet. It's
it's
mainly
gonna be terrible.
no, it's a reference.
Okay.
What is the meaning of life?
Hmm. Uh, is this a serious question?
No, it's a reference.
Oh, okay, okay. My bad. I missed that.
I'm lightening the mood since
It's 42.
someone. Yeah, the meaning of life's 42.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes.
Lowe's are nerd. Ignore it.
Apologies.
Okay. Well, if that's that, then time to wrap up, I suppose.
Yep.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this episode of the Day Class Podcast on Combat Connections. If you like this video, hit like, subscribe, leave a comment letting us know what you want to see next time. Follow our TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, website, and other podcasting platforms. Thank you, Gyro, for being our guest today. If you want to just close out by telling people where they can find you and what you do on your platforms.
All right. Thank you for having me once again, and I hope my answers were sufficient or interesting. So I do mostly do martial arts stuff. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. I also occasionally do other stuff like music and gaming, but mostly martial arts stuff.
And your app for the people that that don't know would be
Oh, for most of my social media, just search up Gyro under dash Orc, and for my YouTube channel, subscribe to Gyro Orc, martial arts and other stuff.
You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Gyro Orc, martial arts, and other stuff. Thank you, Gyro, for joining us, and goodbye.